burrito. It's chipotle powder and smoked paprika. Mexican four-style cheese blend from the commissary. The commissary brand on any military post. It's a 2 pound bag of cheese. It's pretty good. Whichever tortilla, I haven't decided on a favorite tortilla yet. It's really just the cheese delivery device. So, let's read War and Peace. See where we're at. Chapter 21. While in the Rostov's ballroom, the Sixth Anglaise was being danced to a tune in which the weary musicians blundered, and while tired footmen and cooks were getting the supper, Count Bezukov had a sixth stroke. The doctors pronounced recovery impossible. After a mute confession, communion was administered to the dying man. Preparations made for the sacrament of unction, and in his house there was the bustle and thrill of suspense usual at such moments. Outside the house, beyond the gates, a group of undertakers who hid whenever a carriage drove up waited in expectation of an important order for an expensive funeral. The military governor of Moscow, who had been assiduous in sending aides to camp to inquire after the count's health, came himself that evening to bid a last farewell to the celebrated grandee of Catherine's court, Count Bezukov. The magnificent reception room was crowded. Everyone stood up respectfully when the military governor, having stayed about half an hour alone with the dying man, passed out, slightly acknowledging their bows and trying to escape as quickly as possible from the glances fixed on him by the doctors, clergy, and relatives of the family. Prince Vasily, who had grown thinner and paler during the last few days, escorted him to the door, repeating something to him several times in low tones. When the military governor had gone, Prince Vasily sat down all alone on a chair in the ballroom, crossing one leg high over the other, leaning his elbow on his knee and covering his face with his hand. After sitting so for a while, he rose and looking about him with frightened eyes, went with unusually hurried steps down the long corridor leading to the back of the house, to the room of the eldest princess. Those who were in the dimly lit reception room spoke in nervous whispers, and whenever anyone went into or came from the dying man's room, grew silent and gazed with eyes full of curiosity or expectancy at his door, which creaked slightly when opened. The limits of human life are fixed and may not be overpassed, said an old priest to a lady who had taken a seat beside him and was listening naively to his words. "I wonder, is it not too late to administer unction?" asked the lady, adding the priest's clerical title as if she had no opinion of her own on the subject. "Ah, madam, it is a great sacrament," replied the priest, passing his hand over the thin grizzled strands of hair combed back across his bald head. "Who was that? The military governor himself?" was being asked at the other side of the room. "How young looking he is." "Yes, and he is over 60. I hear the count no longer recognizes anyone. They wished to administer the sacrament of unction." I don't know what that is. The sacrament of unction, also known as the anointing of the sick or extreme unction, is a rite in various Christian churches, particularly within Catholicism and Orthodoxy, where a sick or ailing person is anointed with oil, often blessed and prayed over. It is performed to offer healing, comfort, and forgiveness of sin, and to prepare the individual for the journey to the afterlife. I wonder, is it not too late to administer unction? Asked the lady, adding the priest's clerical title as if she had no opinion of her own on the subject. Ah, madam, it is a great sacrament, replied the priest, passing his hand over the thin grizzled strands of hair combed back across his bald head. Who was that? The military governor himself? Was being asked at the other side of the room. How young looking he is. Yes, and he is over 60. I hear the count no longer recognizes anyone. They wished to administer the sacrament of unction. I knew someone who received that sacrament 7 times. The second princess had just come from the sick room with her eyes red from weeping and sat down beside Dr. Lorraine, who was sitting in a graceful pose under a portrait of Catherine, leaning his elbow on a table. Beautiful, said the doctor, in answer to a remark about the weather. The weather is beautiful, princess. Besides, in Moscow one feels as if one were in the country. Yes, indeed, replied the princess with a sigh. So he may have something to drink? Lorraine considered. Has he taken his medicine? Yes, the doctor glanced at his watch. Take a glass of boiled water and put in a pinch of cream of tartar. And he indicated with his delicate fingers what he meant by a pinch. There has never been a case, a German doctor was saying to an aide-de-camp, that one lives after the third stroke. And what a well-preserved man he was, remarked the aide-de-camp. And who will inherit his wealth? He added in a whisper. It won't go begging, replied the German with a smile. Everyone again looked toward the door, which creaked as the second princess went in with the drink she had prepared according to Lorraine's instructions. The German doctor went up to Lorraine. Do you think he can last till morning? Asked the German, addressing Lorraine in French, which he pronounced badly. Lorraine, pursing up his lips, waved a severely negative finger before his nose. Tonight, not later, said he in a low voice. And he moved away with a decorous smile of self-satisfaction at being able clearly to understand and state the patient's condition. Meanwhile, Prince Vasily had opened the door into the princess's room. In this room it was almost dark. Only 2 tiny lamps were burning before the icons, and there was a pleasant scent of flowers and burnt pastilles. The room was crowded with small pieces of furniture, whatnots, cupboards, and little tables. The quilt of a high, white-feathered bed was just visible behind a screen. Do you think he can last till morning? Asked the German, addressing Lorraine in French, which he pronounced badly. Lorraine, pursing his lips, waved a severely negative finger before his nose. Tonight, not later, said he in a low voice, and he moved away with a decorous smile of self-satisfaction at being able clearly to understand the state of the patient's condition. Meanwhile, Prince Vasily had opened the door into the princess's room. In this room it was almost dark. Only two tiny lamps were burning before the icons, and there was a pleasant scent of flowers and burnt pastilles. The room was crowded with small pieces of furniture, whatnots, cupboards, and little tables. The quilt of a high white feather bed was just visible behind a screen. A small dog began to bark. "Ah, is it you, cousin?" She rose and smoothed her hair, which was as usual so extremely smooth that it seemed to be made of one piece, and her head and with her head and covered She rose and smoothed her hair, which was as usual so extremely smooth that it seemed to be made of one piece, with her head that it seemed to be made of one piece with her head and covered with varnish. "Has anything happened?" she asked. "I am so terrified." "No, there is no change. I only came to have a talk about business, Katish," muttered the prince, seating himself wearily on the chair she had just vacated. "You have made the place warm, I must say," he remarked. "Well, sit down. Let's have a talk." "I thought perhaps something had happened," she said with her unchanging, stonily severe expression, and sitting down opposite the prince, she prepared to listen. "I wish to get a nap, mon cousin, but I can't." "Well, my dear," said Prince Vasily, taking her hand and bending it downwards as was his habit. It was plain that this "well" referred to much that they both understood without naming. The princess, who had a straight, rigid body abnormally long for her legs, looked directly at Prince Vasily with no sign of emotion in her prominent gray eyes. Then she shook her head and glanced up at the icons with a sigh. This might have been taken as an expression of sorrow and devotion, or of weariness and hope of resting before long. Prince Vasily understood it as an expression of weariness. "And I," he said, "do you think it is easier for me? I am as worn out as a post horse, but still I must have a talk with you, Katish. A very serious talk." Prince Vasily said no more, and his cheeks began to twitch nervously, now on one side, now on the other, giving his face an unpleasant expression which was never to be seen on it in a drawing room. His eyes, too, seemed strange. At one moment they looked impudently sly, and at the next glanced round in alarm. The princess, holding her little dog on her lap with her thin, bony hands, looked attentively into Prince Vasily's eyes, evidently resolved not to be the first to break silence if she had to wait till morning. "Well, you see, my dear princess and cousin, Catherine Seminovna," continued Prince Vasily, returning to his theme, apparently not without an inner struggle. "At such a moment as this one must think of everything. One must think of the future, of all of you. I love you all like children of my own, as you know." The princess continued to look at him without moving, and with the same dull expression. "And then, of course, my family has also to be considered." Prince Vasily went on, testily pushing away a little table without looking at her. "You know, Katish, that we, you three sisters, Mamontov, and my wife, are the Count's only direct heirs. I know how hard it is for you to talk or think of such matters. It is no easier for me, but, my dear, I am getting on for 60, and must be prepared for anything. Do you know I have sent for Pierre?" The Count, pointing to his portrait, definitely demanded that he should be called. Prince Vasily looked questioningly at the princess, but could not make out whether she was considering what he had just said, or whether she was simply looking at him. "There is one thing I constantly pray God to grant, mon cousin," she replied, "and it is that he would be merciful to him, and would allow his noble soul peacefully to leave this—" Yes, of course," interrupted Prince Vasily impatiently, rubbing his bald head and angrily putting back towards him the little table that he had pushed away. But in short, the fact is, you know yourself that last winter the Count made a will by which he left all his property, not to us, his direct heirs, but to Pierre. He has made wills enough, quietly remarked the princess, but he cannot leave the estate to Pierre. Pierre is illegitimate. But, my dear, said Prince Vasily suddenly, clutching the little table and becoming more animated and talking more rapidly, what if a letter has been written to the emperor in which the Count asks for Pierre's legitimation? Do you understand that in consideration of the Count's services, his request would be granted? The princess smiled as people do, who think they know more about the subject under discussion than those they are talking with. I can tell you more, Count, continued Prince Vasily, seizing her hand. That letter was written, though it was not sent, and the emperor knew of it. The only question is, has it been destroyed or not? If not, then as soon as all is over, and Prince Vasily sighed to intimate what he meant by the words, all is over. And the Count's papers are opened. The will and letter will be delivered to the emperor, and the petition will certainly be granted. Pierre will get everything as the legitimate son. And our share? Asked the princess, smiling ironically as if anything might happen. Only not that. But my poor Katish, it is as clear as daylight. You will then be the legal heir to everything, and you won't get anything. You must know, my dear, whether the will and letter were written, and whether they have been destroyed or not. And if they have somehow been overlooked, you ought to know where they are, and must find them, because... What next? The princess interrupted, smiling sardonically, and not changing the expression of her eyes. I'm a woman, and you think we are all stupid. But I know this. An illegitimate son cannot inherit un bâtard, a bastard, she added, as if supposing that this translation of the word would effectively prove to Prince Vasily the invalidity of his contention. Well, really, Katish, can't you understand? You are so intelligent. How is it you don't see that if the Count has written a letter to the emperor begging him to recognize Pierre as legitimate, it follows that Pierre will not be Pierre, but will become Count Bezúkhov, and will then inherit everything under the will? And if the will and letter are not destroyed, then you will have nothing but the consolation of having been dutiful, état, ce qui s'ensuit, and all that follows therefrom. That's certain. I know the will was made, but I also know that it is invalid, and you, mon cousin, seem to consider me a perfect fool. And the princess, with the expression women assume when they suppose they are saying something witty and stinging. My dear Princess Catherine Simonovna, began Prince Vasily impatiently, I came here not to wrangle with you, but to talk about your interests as with a kinswoman, a good, kind, true relation. And I tell you for the 10th time that if the letter to the emperor and the will in Pierre's favor are among the Count's papers, then, my dear, you and your sisters are not heiresses. If you don't believe me, then believe an expert. I have just been talking to Dmitri Onufrich, the family solicitor, and he says the same. At this, a sudden change evidently took place in the princess's ideas. Her thin lips grew white, though her eyes did not change, and her voice, when she began to speak, passed through such transitions as she herself evidently did not expect. That would be a fine thing, she said. I never wanted anything, and I don't now. She pushed the little dog off her lap and smoothed her dress. And this is gratitude. This is recognition for those who have sacrificed everything for his sake, she cried. It's splendid. Fine. I don't want anything, Prince. Yes, but you are not the only one. There are your sisters, replied Prince Vasily, but the princess did not listen to him. Yes, I knew it long ago, but had forgotten. I knew that I could expect nothing but meanness, deceit, envy, intrigue, and ingratitude. the blackest ingratitude in this house. Do you or do you not know where that will is? Insisted Prince Vasily, his cheeks twitching ever more than ever. His cheeks twitching more than ever. Yes, I was a fool. I still believed in people, loved them, and sacrificed myself. But only the base, the vile succeed. I know who has been intriguing. The princess wished to rise, but the prince held her by the hand. She had the air of one who has suddenly lost faith in the whole human race. She gave her companion an angry glance. There is still time, my dear. You must remember, Katish, that it was all done casually in a moment of anger, of illness, and was afterwards forgotten. Our duty, my dear, is to rectify his mistake, to ease his last moments by not letting him commit this injustice, and not to let him die feeling that he is rendering unhappy those who sacrificed everything for him, chimed in the princess, who would again have risen had not the prince still held her fast, though he never could appreciate it. No, mon cousin, she added with a sigh, I shall always remember that in this world one must expect no reward, that in this world there is neither honor nor justice. In this world one has to be cunning and cruel. Now come, be reasonable. I know your excellent heart. No, I have a wicked heart. I know your heart, repeated the prince. I value your friendship, and wish you to have as good an opinion of me. Don't upset yourself, and let us talk sensibly while there is still time. Be it a day, or be it but an hour, tell me all you know about the will, and above all, where it is. You must know. We will take it at once and show it to the count. He has no doubt forgotten it and will wish to destroy it. You understand that my sole desire is conscientiously to carry out his wishes. That is my only reason for being here. I came simply to help him and you. Now I see it all. I know who has been intriguing. I know, cried the princess. That's not the point, my dear. It's that protege of yours, that sweet Princess Drobetskaya, that Anna Mikhailovna, whom I would not take for a housemaid, the infamous, vile woman. Do not let us lose any time. Don't talk to me. Last winter she wheeled herself in here and told the Count such vile, disgraceful things about us, especially about Sophie. I can't repeat them. That it made the Count quite ill, and he would not see us for a whole fortnight. I know it was then he wrote this vile, infamous paper, but I thought the thing was invalid. We've got to it at last. Why did you not tell me about it sooner? It's in the inlaid portfolio that he keeps under his pillow, said the princess, ignoring his question. Now I know. Yes, if I have a sin, a great sin, it is hatred of that vile woman. Almost shrieked the princess, now quite changed. And what does she come worming herself in here for? But I will give her a piece of my mind. Time will come. Well, chapter 22. While these conversations were going on in the reception room and the princess's room, a carriage containing Pierre, who had been sent for, and Anna Mikhailovna, who found it necessary to accompany him, was driving into the court of Count Bezukov's house. As the wheels rolled softly over the straw beneath the windows, Anna Mikhailovna, having turned with words of comfort to her companion, realized that he was asleep in his corner and woke him up. Rousing himself, Pierre followed Anna Mikhailovna out of the carriage and only then began to think of the interview with his dying father which awaited him. He noticed that they had not come to the front entrance but to the back door. While he was getting down from the carriage steps, two men who looked like tradespeople ran hurriedly from the entrance and hid in the shadow of the wall. Pausing for a moment, Pierre noticed several other men of the same kind hiding in the shadow of the house on both sides. But neither Anna Mikhailovna nor the footman nor the coach, who could not help seeing these people, took any notice of them. It seems to be all right, Pierre concluded, and followed Anna Mikhailovna. She hurriedly ascended the narrow, dimly lit stone staircase, calling to Pierre, who was lagging behind, to follow. Though he did not see why it was necessary for him to go to the Count at all, still less why he had to go by the back stairs, yet judging by Anna Mikhailovna's air of assurance and haste, Pierre concluded that it was all absolutely necessary. Halfway up the stairs, they were almost knocked over by some men who, carrying pails, came running downstairs, their boots clattering. These men pressed close to the wall and let Pierre and Anna Mikhailovna pass and did not evince the least surprise at seeing them there. "Is this the way to the princess's apartments?" asked Anna Mikhailovna of one of them. "Yes," replied a footman in a bold, loud voice, as if anything were now permissible. "The door to the left, ma'am. Perhaps the Count did not ask for me," said Pierre when he reached the landing. "I'd better go to my own room." Anna Mikhailovna paused and waited for him to come up. "Ah, my friend," she said, touching his arm as she had done her son's when speaking to him that afternoon. "Believe me, I suffer no less than you do, but be a man." "But really, hadn't I better go away?" he asked, looking kindly at her over his spectacles. "Ah, my dear friend, forget the wrongs that may have been done you. Think that he is your father, perhaps in the agony of death." She sighed. "I have loved you like a son from the first. Trust yourself to me, Pierre. I shall not forget your interests." Pierre did not understand a word, but the conviction that all this had to be grew stronger, and he meekly followed Anna Mikhailovna, who was already opening a door. This door led into a back anteroom. An old man, a servant of the princess, sat in a corner knitting a stocking. Pierre had never been in this part of the house and did not even know of the existence of these rooms. Anna Mikhailovna, addressing a maid who was hurrying past with a decanter on a tray as "my dear" and "my sweet," asked about the princess's health, and then led Pierre along a stone passage. The first door on the left led into the princess's apartments. The maid with the decanter in her haste had not closed the door. Everything in the house was done in haste at that time, and Pierre and Anna Mikhailovna, in passing, instinctively glanced into the room, where Prince Vasily and the eldest princess were sitting close together, talking. Seeing them pass, Prince Vasily drew back with obvious impatience, while the princess jumped up and, with a gesture of desperation, slammed the door with all her might. This action was so unlike her unusual composure, and the fear depicted on Prince Vasily's face, so out of keeping with his dignity, that Pierre stopped and glanced inquiringly over his spectacles at his guide. Anna Mikhailovna evinced no surprise. She only smiled faintly and sighed, as if to say that this was no more than she had expected. "Be a man, my friend. I will look after your interests," said she in reply to his look, and went still faster along the passage. Pierre could not make out what it was all about, and still less what watching over his interests meant. But he decided that all these things had to be. From the passage, they went into a large, dimly lit room adjoining the Count's reception room. It was one of those sumptuous but cold apartments known to Pierre only for the front approach. But even in this room there now stood an empty bath, and water had been spilt on the carpet. They were met by a deacon with a censer and by a servant who passed out on tiptoe without heeding them. They went into the reception room, familiar to Pierre, with two Italian windows opening into the conservatory, and its large bust and full-length portrait of Catherine the Great. The same people were still sitting here in almost the same positions as before, whispering to one another. All became silent and turned to look at the pale, tear-worn Anna Mikhailovna as she entered, and at the big, stout figure of Pierre, who, hanging his head, meekly followed her. Anna Mikhailovna's face expressed the consciousness that the decisive moment had arrived. With the air of a practical Petersburg lady, she now, keeping Pierre close beside her, entered the room even more boldly than that afternoon. She felt that as she brought with her the person the dying man wished to see, her own admission was assured. Casting a rapid glance at all those in the room and noticing the Count's confessor there, She glided up to him with a sort of amble, not exactly bowing, yet seeming to grow suddenly smaller, and respectfully receiving the blessing first of one and then of another priest. God be thanked that you are in time, said she to one of the priests. All we relatives have been in such anxiety. This young man is the Count's son, she added more softly. Softly. What a terrible moment. Having said this, she went up to the doctor. Dear doctor, she said, this young man is the Count's son. Is there any hope? The doctor cast a rapid glance upwards and silently shrugged his shoulders. Anna Mikhailovna, with just the same movement, raised her shoulders and eyes, almost closing the latter, sighed and moved away from the doctor to Pierre. To him, in a particularly respectful and tenderly sad voice, she said, trust in his mercy, and pointing out a small sofa for him to sit and wait for her, she went silently towards the door that everyone was watching, and it creaked very slightly as she disappeared behind it. Pierre, having made up his mind to obey his monitress implicitly, moved towards the sofa she had indicated. As soon as Anna Mikhailovna had disappeared, he noticed that the eyes of all in the room turned to him with something more than curiosity and sympathy. He noticed that they whispered to one another, casting significant looks at him with a kind of awe and even servility. A deference such as he had never before received was shown him. A strange lady, the one who had been talking to the priests, rose and offered him her seat. An aide-de-camp picked up and returned a glove Pierre had dropped. The doctors became respectfully silent as he passed by and moved to make way for him. At first Pierre wished to take another seat so as not to trouble the lady, and also to pick up the glove himself and to pass round the doctors, who were not even in his way. But all at once he felt that this would not do, and that tonight he was a person obliged to perform some sort of awful rite which everyone expected of him, and that he was therefore bound to accept their services. He took the glove in silence from the aide-de-camp, and sat down in the lady's chair, placing his huge hands symmetrically on his knees in the naive attitude of an Egyptian statue, and decided in his own mind that all was as it should be, and that in order not to lose his head and do foolish things, he must not act on his own ideas tonight, but must yield himself up entirely to the will of those who were guiding him. Not 2 minutes had passed before Prince Vasily, with head erect, majestically entered the room. He was wearing his long coat with 3 stars on his breast. He seemed to have grown thinner since the morning. His eyes seemed larger than usual when he glanced round and noticed Pierre. He went up to him, took his hand, a thing he never used to do, and drew it downwards, as if wishing to ascertain whether it was firmly fixed on. Courage, courage, my friend. He has asked to see you, that is well, and he turned to go. But Pierre thought it necessary to ask, how is, and hesitated, not knowing whether it would be proper to call the dying man the Count, yet ashamed to call him father. He had another stroke about half an hour ago. Courage, my friend. Pierre's mind was in such a confused state that the word stroke suggested to him a blow from something. He looked at Prince Vasily in perplexity and only later grasped that the stroke was an attack of illness. Prince Vasily said something to Lorraine in passing and went through the door on tiptoe. He could not walk well on tiptoe, and his whole body jerked at each step. The eldest princess followed him, and the priests and deacons and some servants also went in at the door. Through that door was heard a noise of things being moved about, and at last Anna Mikhailovna, still with the same expression, pale but resolute in the discharge of duty, ran out and, touching Pierre lightly on the arm, said, "The divine mercy is inexhaustible. Unction is about to be administered. Come." Peter went in at the door, stepping on the soft carpet, and noticed that the strange lady, the aide-de-camp, some of the servants, all followed him in, as if there were now no further need for permission to enter that room. chapters. Complete. Ugh. I'm gonna go in and out and start a stream for the long real quick just to check in on Shade.